From the very beginning, his life seemed like one long, cruel joke. In his first world, Yamato Takeru was the sort of boy people pretended not to see, easy prey for tormentors, invisible to everyone else. He despised the bullies who cornered him after school, but he loathed the silent bystanders even more. And at the very bottom of it all, he hated himself most of all for never fighting back. Somewhere in that miserable existence, a single wish repeated in his heart like a prayer. If there were such a thing as a second chance, he wanted it. Not to be rich or famous, just to live without constantly hating himself. That wish was answered in the cruelest, strangest way. One day he opened his eyes and found himself in an ornate hall, the air heavy with the scent of incense and polished stone. Robed figures circled him, staring with awe. A young woman with silver hair and sincere eyes stepped toward him, her voice trembling as she welcomed him, and called him by a title that didn't feel like it belonged to him at all. Messiah. He told her there had to be some mistake. His name was Yamato Takeru, just an ordinary boy. But the girl, a saint named Edelweiss, refused to back down. She explained that he had been summoned from another world to defeat a great evil, a demon lord who had ravaged the land, left towns in ruins, and driven countless families into grief through his cruelty. For someone who couldn't even raise his voice against school thugs, the idea of confronting such a monster felt absurd. He struggled to believe any of it was real, yet the weight of her words pressed heavily against his chest. If this really was a new life, if this world had chosen him, then maybe he could become someone different. He learned to conjure magic, staring in fascination at the wavering flame that hovered over his palm the first time he succeeded. Edelweiss praised him for every small step, telling him he was growing, that he was braver than he realized. He decided that in this world he would not run away. No matter how weak he felt, he would keep moving forward. And so he did. He trained until his muscles screamed and his mind felt like it would crack apart from exhaustion. He fought monsters that should have killed him 10 times over. People began to call him a hero in earnest. The demon lord fell by his hand in the end, his reign of terror shattered. And that was when they decided to kill him. He sat chained at the center of a raised platform, the sky bright and indifferent above him. Enchanted restraints sealed his magic, leaving him powerless as the crowd glared with fear instead of gratitude. The Prime Minister stepped forward and declared that by their God's will, they would execute the monster, Yamato Takeru. A man strong enough to slay the demon lord alone was, he warned, a threat too great to ignore. If he ever turned against humanity, their world would be finished, so they must act first. The crowd responded with agitation that quickly turned to bloodlust. Voices rose, telling them to hurry up and cut off his head, insisting he was too dangerous to live. The Prime Minister turned to the bound young man and asked if the former Messiah had any last words. Takeru lowered his eyes to his shackled hands. The chains glowed faintly with sealing magic. Not only had they taken his freedom, they had stripped away even the power he had used to protect them. Treated like an animal led to slaughter, that was his reward. He closed his eyes. He was tired. Tired of begging for a place to belong in any world. Tired of being feared and hated. So he simply told them he had nothing more to say and quietly bid them farewell. As the executioner raised his weapon, a frantic cry cut through the roar of the crowd. Edelweiss pushed desperately through the soldiers, tears streaming down her face, screaming his name and begging them to stop. The guards held her back while she struggled with all her strength to reach him. For a moment, the noise around him seemed to fade. In Japan, no one had ever cried for him. In the summoned world, even after all he had done, most people greeted his death with relief. But there, in that final moment, at least one person was weeping for him, as if losing him truly mattered. That alone, he decided, meant his life had not been entirely empty. Those were his last thoughts before the blade fell. Then, without warning, consciousness returned. He woke up staring at a white ceiling, the smell of antiseptic stinging his nose. The walls were plain and familiar, not stone or stained glass, but smooth and clinical. A curtain, a metal bed rail, quiet humming machines. It was a hospital room. He bolted upright, heart hammering. This wasn't the place where he had been executed. There was no execution platform, no chanting crowd, no Edelweiss screaming his name. Instead, He saw clean tiles, fluorescent lights, and a window with sunlight pouring in. Had he really died? Had those 3 years in the other world been nothing more than a long, vivid dream? Outside the window, 2 small birds perched on the frame, chirping brightly as if teasing his confusion. He glanced toward them, but when his eyes met the faint reflection in the glass, he stopped cold. A stranger was staring back at him. His head was wrapped in bandages, tape and plasters dotted his face. Bruises peeked out from beneath the dressings. His limbs felt heavy and clumsy. When he tried to stand, his legs buckled and he collapsed to the floor with a cry. Pain shot through him and his bones crackled with each small movement. Whoever this body originally belonged to had suffered severe injuries, possibly all at once. On instinct, he reached for the magic he had used all those years in the other world and channeled a basic healing spell. Light poured through him, knitting bone and muscle. The pain ebbed away as if it had been only a memory. He took a shaky breath. If he could still wield magic, then those 3 years hadn't been a dream. He had been summoned. He had fought and died. This was something else entirely, a new life in someone else's body. He pushed himself to his feet and moved toward the mirror, studying the unfamiliar face staring back at him. Even now, free of pain, it didn't feel like his own. Suddenly the door slammed open. A woman rushed inside, calling out a name, her voice thick with panic and relief. Behind her came a doctor in a white coat. The woman threw her arms around him, crying with relief that he had finally woken up. Takeru stood stiffly, unsure how to respond. Her warmth, her desperation, it all hurt more than his injuries ever did. The doctor, pale with shock, muttered that someone with wounds like his shouldn't even be able to sit up, let alone stand. Takeru quietly observed them both. The woman had to be the mother of the boy whose body he now occupied. The doctor was simply doing his job. He obviously couldn't tell them the truth, that their son's soul might be gone, replaced by an execution victim from another world. So, he chose the easiest lie, amnesia. He acted like he didn't recognize her at all. Later, the doctor asked him what he remembered. Takeru improvised, claiming he had been playing on the school rooftop when the fence gave way, and he fell. A simple accident, far easier to believe than the truth. When the doctor asked whether he remembered his name, Kusanagi Takeru, he hesitated for a moment. The name no longer felt like his, but he nodded anyway. During the full examination that followed, the medical team grew increasingly confused. Injuries that should have required months to heal had completely vanished. Bones that had been fractured were perfectly intact, as if nothing had ever happened. Even the most experienced doctors couldn't explain what they were seeing. In the middle of the commotion, more hurried footsteps sounded in the hallway. A man burst into the room, his voice cracking as he called, "Takeru." The woman turned to him with familiar affection, and in that instant it was obvious. This was the father. He rushed to the bedside, pulling his son into a tight embrace. Tears streamed down his cheeks as he thanked whatever power existed that his boy was alive. The mother wrapped her arms around both of them, trembling. Takeru was trapped between them, staring over their shoulders. He could feel their genuine relief, their love, their gratitude just to have their child breathing in front of them again. He thought back to the life he had lost. No parents like this had waited for him there. Whose body had he taken? Whoever Kusanagi Takeru was, he had a family that cared about him deeply. That fact weighed heavily on the newcomer. He silently promised that if there was a way to return this body to its rightful owner, he would find it, even if that soul was asleep or hiding somewhere in the depths of his consciousness. Until then, he would look after this life carefully. Given the miraculous test results, the hospital quickly discharged him. The doctors could only shrug and call it a miracle, even as they frowned at the charts that said he should still be immobilized. He found himself sitting in the back seat of his parents' car as they drove through the city. Neon signs and digital displays flashed by, and the subtle differences nagged at him. Medical devices, road barriers, the style of buildings, everything felt just a bit more advanced than what he remembered from his original time in Japan. This was still his homeland, but not the year 2000 he knew. Inside the car, a screen displayed a news program. An announcer cheerfully reported that today was the last day of May, closing out an unusually warm spring in the year 2040. Takeru stared at the date in disbelief. 40 years. While his soul had been fighting demons in another world, time on Earth had marched on without him. The news shifted to scenes of chaos, monstrous creatures tearing through city streets, creatures disturbingly similar to the ogres and goblins he'd once fought. The anchor praised the hunters who battled them, showing clips of armored fighters unleashing blades, bullets, and spells with practiced precision. Hunters, modern adventurers in suits instead of cloaks. Watching them move with such confidence made something twist inside him. Almost without thinking, he commented that becoming a hunter didn't sound so bad. His mother snorted and told him not to even think about it. Her clumsy son would get torn apart in an instant. His father laughed and agreed, treating the whole idea as a joke. Takeru fell silent and watched another hunter cleave through a pack of monsters on the screen. Even in this version of Japan, people were fighting using spells as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Suddenly, the car lurched. Ahead of them, the air split open, a jagged tear, like reality itself being ripped apart, formed in the middle of the road, dark smoke pouring out and twisting the light around it. Takeru's father slammed the brakes, the car skidding toward the curb. Instinctively, Takeru activated his protective barrier, shielding his parents as the car jolted to a stop. They tumbled out onto the pavement, shaken but unharmed. His father stared at his own hand, muttering in disbelief that it didn't hurt. Takeru quickly asked if they were all right, and they nodded, though both looked pale. Then his father looked up at the expanding rift and shouted, voice trembling. This was a spatial gap. If they stayed here, whatever was coming through would wipe them out. They needed to run. Takeru narrowed his eyes. The swirling distortion looked more than a little like summoning magic from the other world. Before they could escape, something enormous forced its way through the tear. An immense limb tipped with sickle-like claws that widened the rift until an ogre stepped out, towering over cars and pedestrians. Another followed, triggering screams as people scattered in blind panic. Takeru's blood ran cold. He knew exactly what those monsters could do. In his past life, an ogre required a squad of trained knights to bring down. Ordinary civilians had no chance. If it were only his own safety at stake, he would have dealt with the threat instantly. But this body wasn't originally his. If he drew attention and someday had to give it back, Kusanagi's life would be left in shambles. And he'd already learned the hard way that standing out too much was a fast path to an execution platform. His father shouted for him to run, and he did, until he saw those massive claws reaching for his parents. He didn't think. Magic surged through him as he triggered a speed spell, the world blurring as he shot forward and struck the ogre with an explosive burst of power that killed it instantly. Spinning back, he asked his parents if they were all right. Dazed but unharmed, they nodded. Keeping his expression composed, he pointed past the corpse and claimed a hunter had taken the monster down, urging them to leave before more appeared. As they hurried away, he gave the fallen ogre one last look. He had used his power again. That by itself was fine. He was genuinely grateful that he'd been able to protect the couple who had welcomed him back from the brink of death. But his attack had not been the only thing that struck the creature. He had felt another force overlapping with his blow. He followed that sense and spotted a figure standing on a nearby rooftop. A girl, watching him intently. Her sharp eyes tracked him, studying him with cool focus. Back home, his father mourned the ruined car, but ended with a shaky laugh and a sigh of relief that their lives had been spared. Given what they'd just experienced, losing a vehicle felt like a small price. His mother stood in front of the house and smiled tenderly as she hugged him again, welcoming him home. The house itself, of course, meant nothing to him. It belonged to the boy who should have grown up here, not to the Messiah reborn in his place. But as his mother led him from room to room, pointing out family photos stored in her phone, he couldn't help but think that some things never changed. The warmth in a mother's voice, the way parents saved embarrassing pictures, the small traces of an ordinary life. When he entered his room, he paused at the threshold. This was the private space of Kusanagi Takeru, not Yamato Takeru. If he intended to live as this boy, even temporarily, he needed to know who he had replaced. He began by looking for a diary, a notebook, anything handwritten that might reveal the original owner's thoughts. But there was nothing like that. Instead, a book about hunters lay open on the desk, pages marked with numerous bookmarks and sticky tabs. The book was filled with battle reports, rankings, and commentary on guilds and famous hunters. It made the room look less like a teenager's space and more like the corner of an obsessed fan. The original Kusanagi Takaru clearly idolized hunters, following their exploits like others followed athletes or pop stars. As the new Takaru skimmed through it, he found charts of top-ranked hunters and features treating them like celebrities. If he ever joined that world, he thought, he'd probably end up at the top. The idea amused him. He sat down at the desk and realized just how dislocated he felt. The desk, the posters, the books about hunters, none of it matched his memories of Japan. After 3 years in a medieval fantasy world, the technology here was jarring. He picked up his smartphone, a sleek little box that felt both miraculous and intimidating. He fumbled with it, worried about racking up a huge bill for the family. As if on cue, the phone chimed, a notification lighting up the screen. The sudden sound made him jump, his heart pounding more than it had during his final battle with the Demon Lord. He saw a request for facial recognition. Hesitantly, he held the phone up to his face, and, to his surprise, it unlocked. A message from an unknown contact named Araki popped up. The words were laced with venom. The sender accused him of attempting to end his life, an act so crazy it had brought the police to Araki's house. The message ended with a chilling promise: "I will never forgive you for this." Another message came through. Araki promised that as soon as Takeru returned to school, he would make his life even more exciting. A picture of a menacing fighter followed, with the caption, "Get ready." It all clicked into place. The broken bones, the bruises, this Araki was the reason. Kusanagi Takeru was a victim of severe bullying, just as he had been. He felt a surge of irritation, not at the threat, but at the sheer wastefulness of sending so many short, expensive messages. "Stop sending me pictures and think about the cost," he muttered at the screen, his outburst loud enough to bring his new mother to the door. She peeked in, asking if he was all right, and reminding him that they had Wi-Fi. The comment left him utterly bewildered. She apologized for not knocking and gently suggested that, given his memory loss, he could take some time off from school. After she left, Takaru realized he needed to catch up on 40 years of history. He spent hours on the smartphone, absorbing the new reality of his world. 30 years ago, a gate had opened, connecting their world to another dimension and unleashing hordes of monsters. Conventional weapons proved useless against them. Then, seemingly from nowhere, individuals with the ability to use magic appeared. They shared their knowledge, and magic became a widespread discipline. Those who mastered it became magicians, and those who fought the monsters were dubbed hunters, protectors of humanity. Deciding he needed to see this new world for himself, he told his mother he was going for a walk. As he navigated the streets, smartphone in hand, he saw magic woven into the fabric of everyday life. A delivery man levitated a case of drinks. A young girl in a cafe made a glass of juice wobble with concentration before her mother scolded her for playing with her powers. Society had adapted with astonishing speed. 40 years had passed, and what was once otherworldly was now mundane. It made him feel more isolated than ever. Suddenly, a woman's frantic scream shattered the evening calm. "Thief! He stole my bag!" A man was sprinting away, laughing, using a burst of magical energy to enhance his speed, moving faster than a motorcycle. Takeru watched as a crowd gathered around the distraught woman. He saw the thief, a cocky grin on his face, and decided to intervene. He activated his own physical enhancement magic, and in a heartbeat, he was beside the criminal. He grabbed the man's shoulder, casually remarking that if he wanted to be a thief, he needed to be much faster. He took the bag and returned it to the grateful owner, a woman with a child and an elderly relative. She thanked him profusely, but he brushed it off. Her young daughter looked at him with wide, admiring eyes, exclaiming that his magic was amazing. The woman agreed, saying she'd never seen anyone move so fast with an enhancement spell. Takeru made a mental note. He had been too conspicuous. He needed to be more careful. The old woman with them gently took his hand and pressed a few pieces of candy into his palm. "Since you refuse a proper reward," she said with a kind smile, "at least take these." The simple gesture triggered a long-forgotten memory. A time when he was a small boy, massaging his grandmother's shoulders, and she had given him his favorite candy as a reward. A warmth spread through his chest. a feeling of connection he hadn't experienced in a very long time. He clutched the candies and smiled, thanking them. Perhaps this world, for all its changes, still held the same simple kindness. As darkness fell, he started for home. A sudden rustle behind him made him instinctively sidestep, just as a figure flew past, a punch missing him by inches. It was Araki. The bully picked himself up, a furious scowl on his face. "Lucky dodge," he sneered. "You'd be lucky too if you hadn't ignored my messages." Takeru was surprised to see him. Araki, enraged at being addressed so casually, began to scream that trash like him should show proper respect. He ranted about the police coming to his house, his voice a high-pitched yelp. Takeru looked at the fuming boy and felt nothing but amusement. 40 years had passed, but bullies were still the same. He remembered a time when a confrontation like this would have left him frozen with fear. But after facing down dragons and demon armies, this angry teenager seemed less like a threat and more like a barking puppy. Araki, infuriated by Takeru's calm demeanor, grew even angrier. Takeru couldn't help but smile at the absurdity. This only enraged Araki further. "Why are you smiling? The coward who tried to escape by dying is now floating in the clouds." The bully was winding himself up, preparing to strike. Takeru decided he would let his opponent fall, a simple and non-confrontational way to end this. But then Araki crossed a line. "It was a mistake for someone like you to be born," he spat. "And your parents were a mistake too." Something inside Takeru snapped. As Araki raised his fist, Takeru countered. His punch was a precise, controlled burst of power that sent the bully flipping through the air before he crashed to the ground. "Don't you dare speak ill of my parents," Takeru said, his voice cold and steady. Before the dazed Araki could respond, the air above him shimmered and tore open. Another spatial rift. An ogre materialized from the crack and swiped at Araki, sending the boy flying into a wall where he lay limp. Takeru quickly assessed the situation. Araki was unconscious but alive. There were no witnesses. This was an opportunity. Time to end this in the blink of an eye, he thought. He activated his physical enhancement, appearing beside the monster in a flash. He drove his fist straight through the ogre's torso, killing it instantly. The creature's blood splattered across the unconscious form of Araki. Takeru looked at the scene, a dead monster and a blood-soaked bully. "Looks like something out of a horror movie," he mused. The most important thing was the rift. Recalling the summoning magic from the other world, he theorized that destroying the source, the magic circle, should close it. He focused his energy, and with a pulse of power, the rift collapsed in on itself. In the distance, police sirens wailed. This was his cue to leave. He offered a quick, sarcastic prayer for Araki and vanished into the night. Moments later, the police arrived, along with the girl from the rooftop, Takamine Sakura. She surveyed the scene, stunned. A blood ogre, felled by what looked like a single overwhelming blow. The officers reported finding one student unconscious, but mostly unharmed. Sakura knelt, studying the scene and sensing the lingering mana in the air. Far too strong for Araki, someone with such limited ability. He didn't have anywhere near the power to take down a blood ogre in a single blow, so why was he covered in blood? Her mind flashed back to the earlier ogre incident, to the mysterious boy who saved his parents and then vanished. She had dismissed it then, but now a suspicion took shape. She told the police she would contact the Hunters Association. As she walked away, her thoughts raced. A blood ogre required multiple A-rank hunters to bring down, yet someone had killed one instantly and disappeared. A hunter stronger than her was in this city. The next day, Takeru arrived at Kazami High School. His new parents had been reluctant to let him go back so soon, but he insisted. He couldn't let the real Kusanagi Takeru fall behind a whole year in his studies. As he walked across the school grounds, he thought about the parallels between his past life and this new one. Both he and this boy had been pushed to the brink by bullies, but he had been given a second chance, a chance to grow stronger, to fight back. He remembered his training with Edelweiss, the fierce sparring, the shared dreams of a better world. Her memory gave him strength. He took a deep breath and stepped into the school. His homeroom teacher introduced him to the class, explaining his return and his partial memory loss, asking the students to support him. He walked to his desk in silence, feeling the weight of dozens of curious eyes on him. Just then, Araki made a dramatic entrance, his goons loudly praising him for killing the blood ogre. He soaked it all in with a smug grin, bragging, "Who else could it have been?" But when his eyes met Takeru's, his confidence cracked. He clearly remembered being knocked out by the ogre. Trying to save face, Araki looked away and hurried to his seat as if nothing had happened. A boy at the next desk introduced himself as Sawamura Takuro. He mentioned Takeru's supposed amnesia and asked if he was all right. Takeru froze. So, the original owner of this body had a friend. Sawamura smiled warmly, reintroducing himself and reminding him how they used to talk about hunters non-stop. Relief washed over Takeru. The boy he was replacing hadn't been completely alone. The rest of the day dragged painfully. Takeru, who was never a great student even in his previous life, found the futuristic digital curriculum overwhelming. Sawamura watched him struggle and assumed it was due to memory loss, a misunderstanding Takeru found useful. Curious, he quietly asked, "What kind of person was I to you?" Sawamura answered without hesitation, "You were the kindest person in the world." Their conversation ended when two students, a bald boy and another with a headband, approached with snide remarks, quickly joined by Araki. They pressured Sawamura to help with their homework. Ever the gentle one, he agreed and followed them to the library. Takeru knew better. After asking around, he learned they'd gone to the industrial area behind the school. With a sinking feeling, he headed there. He found them as expected. Sawamura bloodied and bruised, being mocked with physics questions while Araki and his cronies took turns beating him. Staying hidden, Takeru watched Araki yank Sawamura's hair and sneer, "Why don't you scream for your friend?" Sawamura refused. He had come here willingly, protecting the boy he thought was too weak to endure another beating. Through bloodied lips, he vowed he would protect Takeru this time, no matter what. That loyalty, pure and stubborn, sparked something in Takeru. It reminded him of Edelweiss. He stepped out from the shadows, and the bullies froze. "I'll play with you now," he said icily. When Sawamura collapsed unconscious, the bald boy mocked how frail he was. Takeru knelt beside him. "He's strong," he said quietly. The bald boy scoffed. Then Takeru moved. One precise strike dropped the bald one, and a quick kick sent the headband guy stumbling. As they both stood up and attacked again, Takeru grabbed them by the heads and slammed their skulls together. Araki, stunned by how fast his supporters fell, charged in a rage, only to be instantly pinned face first into the dirt. Takeru warned him in a low voice that all his barking was becoming a nuisance. When he released him, Araki and his cronies tried to posture, insisting he shouldn't get cocky, but their trembling legs betrayed them. Takeru sighed. In the other world, he had once spared an enemy soldier who begged for mercy, only to learn the man later burned down a town. The lesson was simple. When something starts, you finish it. Magic crackled at his fingertips, until the moment shattered. A blue rift tore open above them, and a massive orc stepped through. Panic erupted. Araki's two henchmen clung to him, begging him to save them, clinging to the reputation he had stolen. Desperate to maintain the lie, Araki summoned a weak fireball that fizzled out before reaching the monster. The orc casually swatted him aside with a single backhand. His terrified cronies fled instantly. The monster turned to Takeru, who answered with a blazing sphere of fire that reduced it to ash. When he approached the injured Araki, the bully shrank back, calling him a monster. Instead of punishing him, Takeru placed a hand over his wounds and healed him. Then, with a simple tap of his finger against the ground, he let the earth crack open, showing Araki just how overwhelming his strength was. Terrified, Araki could only stare as Takeru calmly laid out his terms. Araki would take credit for defeating the monster, just like he did with the Blood Ogre. With no witnesses, the story was his to claim. But he would stay far away from Takeru and Sawamura, and the bullying ended permanently. Any return to old habits would not be met with mercy. The message landed. The once arrogant leader trembled like a scolded puppy. Voices echoed in the distance, hunters approaching. Takeru lifted the unconscious Sawamura into his arms, told Araki to stall the rescuers, then vanished from the scene, leaving the newly minted hero alone amid the shattered ground. At the Uran Academy Hunter Training School, a young hunter reported to Sakura. She had been dispatched to deal with the orc at Kazami High, but by the time she arrived, the monster was already gone. The student found at the scene, she reported, was the same one from the Blood Ogre incident, Araki. He claimed to have defeated the orc himself, but the residual mana at the scene told a different story. It was immense, a monstrous power that could not possibly belong to a high school student. Sakura listened, her expression unreadable. She had suspected as much. This student was a cover for someone else, someone who had intentionally vanished before the authorities arrived. She thanked the junior hunter and dismissed her, resolving to handle the investigation herself. She had to get to the bottom of this. She had to talk to Araki. Her investigation led her to Kazami High, and something unusual was happening there. Everyone was shocked to see Araki, once a notorious bully, sitting at his desk with neatly combed hair, quietly focused on his electronic notebook. His former cronies openly mocked him for his sudden transformation. The rest of the class, including a newly arrived Sawamura, watched in stunned silence. When Takeru entered, he greeted Sawamura and asked about the fresh bandages on his face. Sawamura claimed he had just taken a bad fall, a lie meant to protect Takeru from the truth. Takeru felt a pang of guilt. He had wanted to heal those wounds, but never got the chance. As Sakura waited outside Kazami High, she considered her next move. The Hunters Association monitored anyone with significant mana output, and an unregistered powerhouse was a serious threat. Her thoughts were interrupted by a familiar, arrogant voice, Orochi Hibawa Jin, an S-rank hunter and leader of the aggressive Ouroboros Guild. His presence made it clear he was after the same mysterious individual she was. Their tense exchange ended abruptly as the air warped and a new rift opened inside the school. Panic spread instantly as students and teachers scrambled to evacuate. Orochi dismissed the threat and walked away, leaving Sakura seething. She rushed toward the rift as ghouls and skeletons flooded the hallways, cutting them down with precise bursts of lightning-infused speed, while directing students to safety. Amid the chaos, she felt a surge of mana from the roof, far stronger than anything below. Racing upstairs, she finally found him. His back was turned, but the immense mana signature confirmed he was the one she had been searching for. He stood before the rift, weaving complex patterns of light to force it shut. The moment the rift sealed, he stood up and, without turning, bolted. Sakura shouted for him to stop, unleashing her lightning speed to give chase. He was impossibly fast, moving with an agility that seemed to defy the physical enhancement spell he was using. But he was holding back, intentionally limiting his power to match the physical capabilities of Kusanagi Takeru's untrained body. This body wasn't like his previous one, and he briefly considered training it in a way that would eventually reshape it completely. Then, without warning, he used aerial boost, and with a sharp sonic boom, he vanished from Sakura's sight. Sakura skidded to a stop on a nearby rooftop, stunned. He was gone. Takeru, having easily outrun his pursuer, walked calmly down a residential street. He had left his backpack at school, but figured he could retrieve it tomorrow. The hunter girl was strong, he admitted. He couldn't afford to be careless. He arrived home, calling out that he was back. His mother rushed to him, relief washing over her face. She had seen the news about the attack on his school and had been sick with worry when he didn't answer his phone. She casually mentioned that his friend had stopped by earlier to drop something off and was waiting in the living room. Takeru, assuming it was Sawamura, headed in without thinking. But the moment he stepped through the doorway, he froze. Sitting at the dining table, calmly sipping tea as if she lived there, was the hunter who had been chasing him. Sakura looked up with a pleasant, composed smile. She set her mug down and addressed him by name, introducing herself as S-rank hunter Takamane Sakura, and thanking him for his earlier assistance. Takeru stared back, his thoughts scrambling. Her expression didn't change as she continued, explaining that she had a few questions about the abandoned factory, the blood ogre, and the events at his school. A practiced smile stretched across Takeru's lips, a fragile mask over a storm of pure, unadulterated panic. He was cornered. There was no escape, and the presence of his new mother, who was looking on with a beaming, completely misinformed expression, made the situation infinitely more complicated. Every potential path forward seemed to lead directly to disaster. Taking a breath, he decided on a tactical retreat. He turned to Sakura, his smile unwavering, and suggested they talk somewhere more private. Since she had gone to the trouble of coming all this way, he insisted on thanking her properly. offering his room as a place where they could speak freely. After a moment of consideration, the huntress agreed. Takeru's mother, completely misinterpreting the situation as a budding teenage romance, enthusiastically offered to run out and buy a cake. Takeru gently shut down the idea, promising to make some black tea instead, and led Sakura to his room. Once inside, he offered her the desk chair, but she remained standing, her posture radiating an unnerving intensity. Takeru took the seat himself, a wave of weariness washing over him. Sakura wasted no time. Her question was a dagger, sharp and direct. "So, who are you?" He had to admire her bluntness. No amount of deflection would faze a person like this. She continued, her voice low and serious, stating that depending on his answer, she might be forced to use less pleasant methods of persuasion. He knew she was not bluffing. If he lied, her sharp instincts would likely detect it. But telling her the truth, that he was a reincarnated hero from another dimension, would sound like a lunatic's rambling. What could he possibly say? As he hesitated, she moved with startling speed, pressing him against the desk, her face inches from his. The fact that he was silent, she noted, meant he was hiding something. He held up a hand to create some space between them, an absurd image flashing through his mind, an angry little pig, snorting and ready to charge. He told her he had done nothing wrong, falling back on his most reliable defense, his amnesia. He explained that his parents and the school could corroborate his condition. Sakura wasn't convinced. Even with amnesia, she argued, his calm demeanor during the monster attacks was unnatural. A normal person, even one with a talent for magic, would have been terrified. Takeru, picturing the piglet nudging his hand with its snout, simply replied that he didn't know why. It just happened that way. The look of disbelief on her face told him he had perhaps overplayed the naive act. She pressed again, demanding to know why he was hiding his immense power. He countered by saying that even if he did possess such abilities, it didn't mean he wanted to use them. In fact, they scared him. She pointed out that his skills were on par with the highest level hunters, but he insisted he had no desire to join their ranks and cause his parents any more worry. She looked at him, her gaze searching his face, and asked if he truly didn't care about the status, fame, and glory that could be his. He could have anything he wanted. Takeru's answer was calm and unwavering. He didn't need any of that. A life of peace and quiet was all he desired. His sincerity seemed to surprise her. She was quiet for a long moment before finally stepping back. She understood, she said. As long as he didn't use his power for evil, neither she nor the Hunters Association would interfere. She would even cover for him, claiming she was the one who resolved the situation at his school. Takeru was stunned. He asked if she really believed him. Sakura admitted that she wasn't taking him at his word entirely, but his actions spoke for themselves. Everything he had done so far had been to protect other people. The peaceful resolution was almost anticlimactic. As he walked her to the door, Sakura bowed and apologized for stalking him and for her inappropriate behavior in his home. Takeru insisted the apology should be his for acting so suspiciously. Just before she left, she offered a piece of advice. Setting a 4-0 password on his smartphone was a terrible idea. She had cracked it easily, found his name, and then simply asked around at school to find his address. Takeru felt a gloomy sense of resignation. That's how she had found him. He asked her why someone of her status would go to such lengths. Her answer was simple and earnest. She became a hunter so that people like him could live in peace. She added that he wouldn't be able to hide his power forever, but for as long as he wished for an ordinary life, she would do her best to protect it for him. As she walked away, Takeru was struck by the similarity. In this world too, there were people like Edelweiss. Meanwhile, Sakura walked away feeling pleased with the outcome. She had saved his number, just in case. She recalled his confusion about modern technology, how he had asked where the phone's infrared sensor was, and she had joked about him setting a trap. He was a mysterious person. Later, the school's sudden closure left Takeru with unexpected free time, which he quickly filled by returning to an old routine, his daily run. It was a habit ingrained into him during his time in the other world, shaped by relentless training under a strict general who had taught him the foundations of swordsmanship. Those memories remained sharp. The training had been punishing in the beginning, but it had molded both his body and his resolve. While running through the city, he noticed a crowd gathered around a dark rift. The sight immediately caught his attention. A black rift meant a gateway to another world, an unstable dungeon that needed to be cleared before stronger monsters emerged. The possibility stirred something in him. Perhaps this portal connected to the world he had come from. Perhaps it could offer answers. Before he could entertain the idea further, a heavy presence approached. The leader of the Windguard, Gatu, arrived with his team, confidently taking charge of the scene. His massive frame and commanding aura made him unmistakable as the group's frontline tank. Behind him stood Shirai, with her bright, warm demeanor, the composed and quiet Tamiya, and the lively Amamiya. Together, they embodied the exact spirit their banner portrayed: vibrant, self-assured, and unmistakably theatrical. As preparations were made to enter the rift, Godamoru's enthusiasm was cut short when one of his teammates, Uichi, abruptly sent him through the portal with a firm push, signaling the start of their operation. The team followed after him with practiced ease, leaving the crowd buzzing in their wake. Takeru watched the chaotic scene unfold, reminded uncannily of the squad he once knew in the other world. The same mix of disorder, confidence, and unshakable reliability that had defined his former general's unit. The memory transported him back to the front lines of the war against the Demon Lord. He was sparring with General Grotto, a man who had become a grandfather figure to him. Grotto effortlessly dodged Takeru's attacks, pointing out a gap in his defense before sweeping his legs out from under him and placing a sword at his neck. The general praised his rapid growth, but reminded him that a strong attack always leaves an opening. The key was to create and exploit such a gap for yourself. Their lesson was cut short by a monster that scaled the fortress wall, catching the guards by surprise. It moved with blinding speed, grievously wounding Grotto before he could react. Takeru froze, paralyzed by fear. Grotto yelled at him to run, vowing to hold the creature off. The general, who had already lost his wife and son in the war, confessed that Takeru had become like a grandson to him, and he couldn't bear to lose him too. Takeru wanted to run, but he couldn't. He couldn't use this man as bait to save himself. He had come to this world to change, to forget the coward he used to be. With a defiant scream, he charged. Grotto yelled that his wide, clumsy swing would never work. But Takeru remembered the lesson. If he created a gap for himself, he would know exactly where to strike. He timed his move perfectly, his blade finding its mark and killing the beast. Grotto was in shock. Takeru explained simply that he would also be sad to lose his grandfather. The general, bleeding but beaming with pride, declared his performance was worth 500 billion points. Back in the present, Takeru stretched, the memory fading. The boisterous Godamoru and the stern general were cut from the same cloth. He decided to focus on his own training, starting with light cardio and stamina building. He had to be careful not to alter this body too drastically. His thoughts were interrupted by shouting from the direction of the rift. He pushed through the crowd and saw a wounded Godamoru lying near the portal, screaming that one of his teammates, Shirai, was still inside. The others were trying to calm him, insisting that they had to wait for backup. Amamiya was hysterical, accusing them of leaving Shirai behind to distract the monsters. Godamoru fell to his knees, sobbing, begging forgiveness for his weakness. Takeru looked at the scene, a grim reflection of what could have been his own future if things had gone differently. Someone had to do something. Before he could consciously process the decision, he was already walking toward the portal. Without thinking, he stepped through it, then pulled the hood of his sweatshirt over his head to conceal his identity, determined to find Shirai in this world of monsters and magic. A girl perched atop a large beast noticed his arrival and smiled with delighted curiosity, watching him as if hoping this newcomer wouldn't break too quickly. Takeru ran, the environment both alien and nostalgic. The monsters were familiar. He soon came across fragments of a shield and bloodstains, evidence of the Windguard's struggle. Deep within the rift, Shirai was running for her life. She stumbled and fell, a massive cyclops closing in on her. Just as the monster was about to strike, a wall of ice erupted from the ground, killing it in one shot. Takeru appeared, shielding her with his own body. He was glad he made it in time. He quickly checked her for injuries and, seeing she was mostly unharmed, prepared to leave. She thanked him for saving her, but then her eyes widened in recognition. She remembered him. He was the boy from outside the rift. His clothes and his voice were the same. Trapped, Takeru admitted she had a good memory. Shirai explained that as the team's recruiter, she was trained to be observant. As he turned to leave, he asked if the Cyclops had been the Rift's boss. When she confirmed it, he urged her to hurry back to her worried friends. Suddenly, a massive shockwave ripped through the air. Takeru reacted instantly, grabbing Shirai's knife and channeling his magic into it before throwing it. The attack pierced through the incoming spell, stunning everyone. Even the demon girl who had launched it, barely managing to dodge at the last moment. Seizing the opportunity, Takeru grabbed Shirai and began a tactical retreat. The girl who had attacked them was still shaken by the counter-strike and quickly started preparing another spell. As Takeru pulled Shirai along, he apologized for breaking her knife, promising to repay her with his allowance if it would cover the cost. Just as they neared the gate, Takeru asked if she had anything to obscure the area. Shirai mentioned she had a smoke grenade. When they reached the gate, he asked her for a favor, to keep his identity hidden, and Shirai agreed without hesitation. On the other side, the demon girl finished charging her spell and aimed it toward the gate, pausing briefly when Takeru glanced back at her. She released the spell, but by then they had already escaped. Frustration flickered across her face. She had hoped the game would last longer and looked forward to playing with them again. Outside, the Wind Guard was already celebrating Shirai's safe return. From behind a nearby tree, Takeru watched just long enough to make sure she was unharmed before quietly slipping away unnoticed. The next day, Takeru, Sawamura, and to his surprise, Araki were transferred to Oran Academy, a prestigious hunter training school, until Kazami High could be repaired. The academy was an impressive institution, one where the nation's elite were shaped and trained. As Sawamura excitedly pointed out the school's features and its famous alumni, including Sakura, Takeru noticed that nearly every student was armed, always prepared for combat. Sawamura, completely unaware of Takeru's recent adventures, asked if he had met the famous Sakura when she returned his phone. Takeru casually downplayed the encounter, knowing that if Sawamura learned the truth, it would only create a mountain of trouble. His friend warned him to be careful. Sakura apparently had a massive fan club. Right on cue, Sakura appeared, walking down the corridor. The chatter around them faded as students paused to admire her presence. When her eyes met Takeru's, she gave him a small, acknowledging nod. Sawamura froze in disbelief and grabbed Takeru's shoulder, ready to interrogate him. But before the questions could spill out, Takeru quickly hurried toward the cafeteria, desperate to avoid the grilling. Neither of them realized that someone else had been watching. Later, Sakura called Takeru to her office. She told him that the Hunters Association was in an uproar. The Black Rift had been officially classified as D rank, something the C rank Wind Guard should have handled easily. However, an A rank Cyclops had appeared inside, along with an unaccounted for power signature, his. No one knew if this mysterious third party was friend or foe. Takeru apologized, but Sakura stopped him. What he did was right, she insisted, but he was still a civilian who wished for a peaceful life. She had promised to protect that life, and she asked him to leave the dangerous work to the hunters. After all, he had parents who worried about him. As he left her office, Takeru was struck by her genuine kindness. He could understand why she had a fan club. His thoughts were suddenly interrupted by the appearance of goblins. He instinctively prepared to fight but forced himself to stop, remembering the promise he had just made to Sakura. Before he could decide what to do, a team of students arrived, surrounding the creatures. One boy, a flamboyant student wielding a spear, finished off a goblin with a dramatic flourish, the tip stopping just inches from Takeru's face. He winked and introduced himself with theatrical confidence. Byuduin Suma, second year, heir to the Byuduin Spearman clan, A-rank hunter, and president of the Oran Society. A fan club devoted entirely to Sakura. A chill ran down Takeru's spine. This guy screamed trouble. Suma went on to explain that their guild existed to worship the goddess Sakura and protect the city in her name. He claimed he had seen Takeru's passionate gaze at Sakura during lunch and decided he would be the perfect addition to their group. Takeru had zero interest in joining any fan club, but Suma was persistent. He also pointed out that Takeru's lack of panic during the goblin attack was suspicious. Takeru tried to brush it off as being frozen with fear, but Suma saw through the lie. Then Sakura appeared, asking if a rift had opened. Takeru explained that Suma's team had already handled it, but when they turned around, the group had vanished. The next morning, Suma was waiting at Takeru's classroom door. Throughout the day, Takeru could feel Suma's eyes drilling into him. By lunchtime, he was about to explode, but Sawamura leaned in and warned him that Suma was a big deal, a prodigy from a famous clan and one of the top 5 A-rank hunters at the academy. During their next class, Practical Hunter Training, the students fought doppelganger slimes, created by a machine that allowed the instructors to mimic real monsters. Takeru finally witnessed Suma's combat ability firsthand, and he had to admit he was impressed. When it was the newcomers' turn, Takeru, Sawamura, and Araki faced a group of mock goblins. Sawamura and Araki used fireballs, while Takeru remained completely still. As a goblin charged him, he didn't move a muscle. He wanted to attack in a way that wouldn't draw suspicion. Slow, controlled, human-like. But even when he tried to restrain himself, the result was anything but normal. The spectators didn't even notice him move before the goblin's head split cleanly in two. Takeru showed no emotion for a moment, then laughed it off, casually claiming the machine must be broken. A bewildered Araki, catching on quickly, immediately agreed. Later, in the library, Takeru searched for a way to return Kusanagi Takeru's body to its rightful owner. While browsing through various books and articles, he came across a magazine feature on Japan's strongest hunter, the god of war, Uesugi, whose technique involved absorbing the spirits of deceased heroes. It was the closest thing he had encountered that resembled his own situation. The thought lingered. Could the real Takeru's soul still be alive somewhere? Before he could ponder further, Suma suddenly appeared beside him, making him jump. The spearman studied him with clear fascination, remarking that he could tell Takeru was concealing his true abilities. His stance, his movements, even the air around him, all were far beyond that of an ordinary student. Suma's gaze shifted to the magazine on Uesugi, and an idea formed. He offered Takeru a deal. If Takeru agreed to a duel and revealed his real strength, Suma would use his family's influence to arrange a meeting with the elusive Uesugi. Reluctantly, Takeru accepted. There was no other path forward. Suma led him to one of the cleared rift areas on campus, now used as a training ground. He promised to introduce Takeru to Uesugi and keep his powers a secret. The duel began instantly. Suma attacked with a flurry of blindingly fast spear thrusts, but Takeru dodged each one with minimal effort. Suma's technique was flawless, a polished and deadly martial art, but Takeru could read his every move. He was strong for an A rank, but that was all. Takeru decided to end it. He told Suma to dodge properly. In the space between heartbeats, Suma's world shattered. He saw it, not as a possibility, but as a certainty. A flash of steel, a weightless sensation, and the horrifying image of his own head tumbling from his shoulders. It was a vision of his death, delivered in a single chilling instant. Before he could even process the vision, he felt the cold steel of Takeru's practice sword resting against his neck. He had lost. Suma fell to his knees, not in defeat, but in awe. He begged Takeru to show him more of his incredible power. Their duel was interrupted by a deafening roar. The massive bull-like creature used as a training dummy inside the rift began to mutate, its form twisting and growing into a monstrous minotaur. Suma shouted that it was impossible. They weren't supposed to be able to change species. Despite his terror, Suma stepped in front of Takeru, declaring that as the head of Sakura's fan club and an embodiment of her ideals, it was his duty to protect an ordinary citizen. He knew Takeru could defeat the monster easily, but he had to do this. This was his chance to become strong, to be worthy of fighting alongside the girl who had saved him years ago. He recounted the story of how, as a cocky and arrogant middle schooler, he had recklessly entered a rift and was saved by Sakura. Her strength and selflessness had inspired him to change, to seek a strength that came from the heart, not just from talent. He engaged the Minotaur, but the beast's wild, chaotic power was too much for him. Takeru stepped forward and placed a hand on Suma's shoulder, telling him that his skills were amazing. But he was being too careful. He then activated his innate ability, a temporary enhancement that would come with a heavy price later. "Send this monster flying," he said. Infused with overwhelming power, Suma became a whirlwind of motion. With a single explosive strike, he cut down the Minotaur, ending the battle in an instant. As the creature's body dissolved, a small parasitic organism crawled out from the remains. Takeru seized it immediately, recognizing the foul creature from his past. Far away, a snake observed the scene, its movements controlled by Orochi Jin. The parasites they had released were supposed to strengthen the monsters, yet they had failed once again. The girl beside Jin commented on the failure and insisted that next time, they would have to target him directly. Jin looked down at a photo of Takeru on his phone, his expression cold and calculating. He would get him next time. He would get Kusanagi Takeru. Alright, review time. I honestly really enjoyed this one. I'm definitely doing a part 2, so let's try to hit 100 likes and I'll continue the series. This story hits a lot of my favorite tropes, returning from another world, an OP protagonist who is cool-minded and smart instead of the usual clueless, overpowered MC. I love the whole gate and ranking system, and it combines a bunch of popular concepts into something genuinely fun. The supporting cast is surprisingly solid too, with a lot of potential. They don't feel wasted at all. Overall, the story has tons of potential and plenty of chapters to dive into. I seriously enjoyed it, and I'll be dropping part 2 soon.